Good morning, everybody. The mayor is traveling and she hopes to join us for our new meeting today. Um, we'll call the meeting to order. What's that? No, that's for later. And we usually actually don't even have not done it on those days. I want to welcome some very special guests in the audience today. Meredith Stead's father, Ed Stead, her stepmother, Henny, and most of all, Olson, nephew. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. All right. First up, we'll have Courtney Washburn presenting city strategic priorities.
Thank you and good morning. Council members, my name is Courtney Washburn. I'm the Chief of Staff for the City of Boise, and I'm before you today in hopes of providing you a higher level update on our strategic initiatives. So today I will cover housing, transportation, climate, public safety, and economic development. These have been the main priorities of the mayor since she was elected, and many of you, I think, share the same priorities. What I'm hoping to do is give you a higher level perspective on these issues so that you can see some of the progress we're making. I am presenting issues that I don't work directly on. So if you have a question I can't answer, I'll get back to you on that. Um, and then I intend to come back to you with some frequency on these topics. So if you have any questions or if there's other topics you'd like me to cover in the future, feel free to let me know. And with that, I'll start with what I believe is a top priority for everyone, which is housing. Some of you have been at these individual groundbreakings or ribbon cuttings, but I think it's nice to take a moment just to look at the progress we made. So completed in 2025 is Wilson Station. Denton will be completed in December. In 2026, New Path 2.0, which is 95 homes of supportive housing, will be complete, and the Sherwood, which is 48 homes of supportive housing, will be complete. And then in 2027 to 2028, we're looking forward to Dorado Station, Lusk Street, and the Fulton. So this is kind of the timeline for the current funding we have for city invested affordable housing projects. And on the homelessness front, as you all know, not one solution will and can address the challenge of homelessness. We are spending a lot more time working with partner agencies in these spaces to see what can be done to either prevent homelessness or to provide better interactions when people are leaving things like the juvenile service system or state hospitals or IDOC, in addition to trying to understand who is being housed in the county jail and the barriers they face to reentry. All of this work is with the goal of trying to keep people out of homelessness, which is particularly difficult when someone enters one of these systems when they are already experiencing the lack of housing. I'll stop a little because I know there are a lot of words on there. So the idea is to learn more about where folks are coming from and how we can help them sooner. And then a safe and healthy city for everyone is super important. One of my favorite things to do is give a presentation about BPD with the police chief in the room. He is sick and I don't want to share a microphone with him. So I'm going to give this my best shot. So at your direction, very clear progress has been made in regards to the priorities of the police department. Traffic enforcement is up 36%, with almost 27,000 stops conducted between January and September 2025. The crime trends in Boise continue to have a positive trajectory. Overall, major crime is down 18% and it's been driven by a reduction in burglary, theft, and motor vehicle theft. As you may be aware, calls for service and the demands on our police officers has been increasing, and we have consistently seen an increase in calls. In 2024, the increase was almost 10%. And as of September, BPD responded to an increase of about 3% overall in the last same period. And including traffic related, the overall workload by our officers is about 9.5%. The efforts the chief is making with the department to better prioritize the resources we do have includes the patrol staffing model. I believe this is the first time we've created a floor for how many officers we would have serving in patrol, which is 125. And this is both to ensure adequate staffing and to reduce patrol overtime. And then we also are assigning patrol lieutenants to define sections of the city to enhance geographic accountability. An issue I know we have discussed before is BPD has completed a draft related to special events and how we determine the appropriate staffing by BPD of those events. This is currently being vetted with our partners, and we'll return to you once we conclude with that recommendation. And then neighborhood contact officers. The neighborhood contact officers will collaborate with patrol and CID to address any emerging crime patterns, and their efforts will emphasize prevention. You all supported the creation of the juvenile detective positions. We are hopeful these will allow our school resource officers to remain present in school and will allow for greater engagement with staff and students. And then the rank corporal program was one of the items in the contract labor agreement between the city and the police union to create a rank corporal position to assist sergeants with field operations and also to expand on our needs for succession planning. And this is anticipated to start at the end of the first quarter in 2026. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Corliss.
Courtney, thanks so much for giving the presentation and understand the reluctance to want to share a microphone with not feeling well. A couple of questions. So we, on the theft reductions, pretty significant reduction for theft, including the car theft. Do we have an idea of what has precipitated that reduction?
Council member, I think I will defer to the chief on that. I'm assuming he'll have a ready answer. And if he gets me sick, we'll know.
Well,
Do you want to come up?
we do this one.
Chief, do you want to come up here?
Councilmember, yes. Sergeant Thusen was recently assigned to the property crimes section. He has done a fantastic job, him as detectives, aggressively addressing these investigations, making a multitude of arrests. So I think that's where we're seeing the contribution in the reduction is through just aggressive investigations on the back end of these cases and making arrests.
Great, thank you.
Chief, while you're on the topic, could you speak more to establishing a floor for patrol is one thing. How, in your assessment, coming from a different law enforcement agency, how does our department prioritize patrol over investigative work and vice versa? And how are you looking at that and what we do in the department?
Councilmember Nash, so patrol is the backbone of any police department. So ensuring we have adequate staffing to respond to 911 calls is the priority. The next priority is the investigations. Those two are just the critical components to a police department. Anything else are, I would say, are nice to haves. And I think it's important we staff them because it helps maintain our crime prevention strategies. But one of the goals with creating that floor for patrol was we were seeing a lot of overtime impacts on training and how we train. So this gives us the ability with even that we also did a realignment with how the patrol officer is going to deploy with new schedules coming out in early next year, that we will have training days set aside for entire teams to train together to build that unit cohesion that we're looking for. have an overall reduction in overtime, and make sure that we have enough officers to respond. So from any police department, I would say that is the critical key, is those 911 service, the 911 response. And what we're looking at is a 60-40 split in patrol. We want 60% of time allocated to 911 calls for service report writing, 40% of time allocated to on-site activity, traffic enforcement, follow-up, proactive police engagement on problem houses and stuff like that. So that's the model we're shooting for. 125 is what we see as the bare minimum right now. And in a couple of weeks, hopefully, I get the strategic plan in front of you, we'll see where we're going to look to elevate the PD in the future in that area.
Awesome. I know the department and command staff and even some of us are a little stitious, not superstitious, but a little stitious. But I just want to acknowledge that we're coming up on a year with no officer involved shootings. Yep. And I understand that a great deal of that is random. I mean, if an individual pulls a weapon on an officer, I mean, those events are highly likely. But I can't imagine us going a year without having both training and officer response consistent with that training playing a role in that. So I want to commend you for that and give you an opportunity to offer any thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, Councilmember Nash, I'll attribute a ton of it to the police officers. We've been able to look at numerous incidents where officers have been able to use, communication, providing that time distance shielding that we drive into training for blunt and edged weapon defense. And I'll give you an example. Last night, around 1 a.m, we had a gentleman who was suicidal, stopped on the connector. We had to shut down the freeway for a couple hours there. While officers negotiated with, he was armed with a handgun. We were eventually able to resolve that and take him into custody and get him the help he needed. And that really was the work of the patrol teams out there, effectively communicating with him, using the tools, the drones, and some other stuff to be able to keep that distance from him and maintain visual. So this is something we're seeing from our patrol cops and our officers weekly. And so it really is attributable to them. And again, some of it is luck. At the end of the day, we could have a couple back to back, just as a function of the fact that we're reactionary to what somebody else does. I always tell people the suspect gets a say, gets a vote in every one of these incidents. But our officers are doing a really good job putting themselves in the best possible position. So, and another thing that we're also implementing with our sergeants, we're doing these debriefs now on some of these critical incidents to look at lessons learned and where we can improve upon. So, and then we incorporate those immediately into training.
Well, that's really heartening to hear, especially with the incident last night. Those don't get as much, the good interactions don't get as much media attention, but I'm sure it took a lot of patience and a lot of hard work to get that land that situation responsibly. So thank you for your work and your efforts on there. And thank you to all our officers who are doing this and putting themselves in dangerous situations and navigating them very, very responsibly. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chief, while you're up here, one, just going to give you and your team some credit with the traffic enforcement. That was something that our community was really asking for. And I think it's something that people can see increasing, like noticeably see an increase. Doesn't mean that they still wouldn't want to have a patrol car on their street, every single morning as the commuters are coming in. But it looks like we're moving in the right direction there. So thank you for that additional work. I wanted to just check in on the sexual assault cases that we've seen some year after year increases. I know that we've approved some positions in the past couple of years to address that specifically. I'm not sure about any this year, but I'm just wondering if there's any additional efforts going to address what we see as a continual increase in sexual assault cases.
Yeah, council member, we are actively looking at it. We just had our 6th reported one on BSU that's recently occurred. We are working with BSU, the public safety partners there. I had the special victims unit dive back and try to look at what is driving some of these. We are seeing ages of about 14 to 20, 21 is where we're seeing a lot of cases flow from, and alcohol is a contributing factor to a lot of those. So utilizing our alcohol compliance officer to really work with the businesses, making sure we're responsible there. But a lot of this is coming from parties and other areas. That'll be a little harder for us to control. So we were actually meeting today and we discussed doing special deployments specifically around the BSU area and some of the areas like party patrols to really try to drive that down, and then working with education and PSAs on the backside to hopefully mitigate this. One of the other things that we could potentially also see in being the numbers increase is that in recent years, there's been a lot of effort to have people come forward and actually talk about this, which I think is a fantastic thing because it's letting us connect victims to services and giving us a chance to try to resolve these cases through the criminal justice process. So I think that could also be a driver. We know there's a significant amount of crimes that just don't get reported, and the fact that we're seeing more could just be a function of the great work that's being done in the community by advocacy groups, the Ada County Victim Center, and BSU to really try to bring these to the forefront.
Great. Well, I would just I would ask you and the mayor's office as well to make sure that you're talking to council about this issue to figure out if there's additional things that we can be doing to support in that area. Certainly one of the top priorities that I would have, in addition to what you kind of talked about, the alcohol compliance officer that, can actually cover a lot of different area, whether it's sexual assault or traffic safety. So I would just encourage you to come back and to continue to have these conversations with us, because that's definitely a major concern that, I want to make sure that we're helping address.
Yes, Councilmember, and I also want to reiterate in the budget process, you guys did approve an additional special victims detective that will help work those cases. So I think that's going to be hugely helpful for us moving forward as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Corliss.
Yeah. Chief, if I can.
So close.
Yeah, so close. Just a couple of things. So I know we also approved this last budget session for a detective for cyber crimes. If I remember reading a report that I think was put out by BPD, we saw through cyber crimes, I think 22 million of Idaho public people's personal funds left through cyber crimes, and then that increased, I think, to like 53 in 2024. So it'd be interesting. I guess the ask would be if we could include that in the report that's coming up too. And do you think we're making progress, or do you see this continuing to increase?
Councilmember Corliss, I think this is something we're going to see continue to increase with the advent of, with AI becoming so prolific and other issues. We're going to see a lot more of these cyber crimes. That detective position will be filled. So it might be premature to give you an update immediately. It'd probably be something better within the next year to give an update and see what cases that we've made from that. But I do anticipate seeing this continue to be a problem.
Mr. Mayor, just one more question for the chief. When we look at the calls and those increasing, which are we monitoring all call lines that come into BPD? Is it emergency, non-emergency, or how's that tracked?
Councilmember, what we're looking at is we're looking at all calls that come in as far as 911 calls, anything that we're dispatching police officers to. So we separate out those calls for service that are generated from the public from officer initiated activity like traffic stops and on-site or follow-up activity. So that gives us that's how we generate the number for demand on our police resources from the public requesting it. And then what our officers are doing, that's that unallocated time that we're looking for, that 40%.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Stead.
this should be an easy one. Tell me, I know that we have the new detective positions approved starting October 1st. Were those, is there any runway expectation for when they would be filled? Are they difficult to recruit from? Is it like we would see internal candidates? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, Councilmember Stead. So the juvenile detectives, we preloaded those. Those ones are already in place and they're working. As we're graduating academy classes and bringing officers on board, we're filling those. So we expect to fill a chunk of those in December. And then the next chunk we'll probably look at filling as the next class comes out toward the end of the first quarter, I believe in 2026. There might be a couple in there, but that we're also been able to backfill some vacant positions, both in violent crime and in property crime.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for your time up here today. So we noted crime trends continue down with reductions in burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft. What's our clearance rates looking like? Have they always been higher? Are they trending higher? Kind of where does clearance look like and those kinds of things? And then question on calls. So noting that presentation noted that they're increasing. Feedback I get from officers is that it's heavy. They work really hard here. Noted that on ride-alongs. Is that being driven by just growth, the number of people here in Boise or coming into Boise to enjoy Boise, or are there specific kind of trends and specific kind of newer crimes or hot crimes?
Councilmember Morales, yes, we are seeing an increase with population growth. We are going to anticipate more 911 calls. Boise's the hub for Treasure Valley, so we get a lot of people that come in from the surrounding cities to enjoy Boise. That drives calls up, we know there's been an increase in traffic coming into the city, which will increase just traffic complaints and stuff like that, even though we are right now trending downward in overall collisions. Hopefully that'll hold through the end of the year, which is kind of nice with the increase we've seen in traffic flow, but the correlating response for traffic stops, I think, has been really helpful. And I'm sorry, I'm so sick, so I'm a little brain fogged.
Clearance
Oh,
rates.
clearance
So
rates.
on those
Yeah.
specific crimes, we're seeing them go down.
So one of the issues we have right now with our current records management system, it is really difficult for me to gain out clearance rates across the board. I can tell you, like, our homicide clearance rates are at 100% right now for the last, I believe, 2 years, which is fantastic. However, as we get into other crimes, it's difficult with Axon coming on board that was just approved in the budget process. We're going to have a true case management system that will enable the command team and sergeants to really track those clearance rates. And as part of our strategic plan, we will set metrics across the board for every crime classification that we want to see a certain clearance rate on that meets or exceeds national standards. So that will be coming out as part of the strategic plan over the next year as we build that out.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor.
Courtney? Oh, Councilmember Willits.
Right. Chief, one last one, and I want to build on Jordan's question. So what I'm trying to better understand is the workload of our police officers, because the calls of service are going up, but crime is going down. And so you touched on that a little bit in the previous answer, but can you ruminate on that a little bit more, and particularly about what that means for our force? And then why calls are up but crime is down is essentially the second part of the question.
Yeah, Councilmember Willits. So what we're seeing with our crimes are a lot of just the lower level, or I should say calls for service, lower level calls for service. It is the check welfare, some of the crisis response. The crimes that we're typically tracking that we're looking at are the major crimes. I'm looking at homicide, aggravated assault, forcible rape, sexual assault, robbery, burglary, theft from a motor vehicle, theft of a vehicle, arson. Those are the ones that I track and that I'm looking at in the major 8. And when we look at other crime classifications such as drug trafficking or drug sales, some of those will be the crimes outside of the major 8 that we're tracking that can contribute to larger crimes. So while we're still seeing a downward trend for the most part in our top 8 crime classifications, we are seeing a continual increase in demands on police services for a variety of other things. And those, again, could be check welfares, and drug cases or other stuff of that type. So,
Thank you.
All right.
While we're on the topic, the chief has done a nice job with the department in creating what I believe is the police department's first strategic plan. And he is set to bring that to you, I believe in November is when we're going to do it, but at least by the end of the year. So a much longer time frame than the here and now. I think the metric was 5 years out. Which will also help with any facility planning needs they may have moving forward. On a movement for everyone, what's not on the slide, but in the newspaper is the reduction of the scooter speeds that we just implemented both on the Greenbelt and downtown. We received a fair number of complaints, and we're hoping that the reduction in speed will help with the situation. Also increasing public awareness, and also it's gotten colder, so I expect scooter use to decline naturally, but we'll see if we get the intended results from reducing the speed limit on those. And then traffic safety, which is a focus. We have applied for a Safe Streets and Road implementation grant to implement safety measures on Fairview. And the Traffic Fatality Review Task Force successfully implemented 2 projects, streetlights on Cloverdale and a relocation of a sidewalk on Highway 21 where a child was killed. Councilmember Halliburton, I don't know if you had anything to add to that. No.
Yeah, I would just say with the Traffic Fatality Review Task Force, another thing that we've really seen a lot of recently is undetected drug use when people are being pulled over for traffic stops. So not your alcohol, not your regular drugs that people are testing for, but some other drugs that people are actually getting from convenience stores, gas station heroin, other types of things that people aren't always being able to detect. And so we're working with our alcohol compliance officer to get some better guidelines to make sure that they can be working with the police officers, training them to pick up these sort of undetectable drugs that we think people might be using while they're driving at these really excessive speeds that are probably leading to a lot of these crashes. So there'll be more information, coming soon as we talk more with our alcohol compliance officer to see what we can do there.
And then the city continues its effort on the restoration of passenger rail. We've completed an inventory to identify all possible projects. We have been applying for grants in this space as well, including a DOT regional infrastructure grant and a Build America Bureau initiative grant. And now on to
Mr.
climate.
Mayor, just real quick before we move on from there, want to say that I appreciate all the staff's effort on the Lime scooters and the speed limits on the Greenbelt. I think that makes a lot of sense. I do want to note that I'm hearing a lot from the community, and I think that there is a desire from council to be looking into our e-bike ordinance. I believe it was written in 2016 or 17 before I was on council, but I remember coming and testifying for it. And at that time, there really were no e-bikes in the community, hardly at all at that point, and there was no other forms of e-mobility. So our e-scooters, our e-skateboards, one-wheelers, all the different types of things that we're seeing there that may be out of the classes that we created. And so I think that there is some desire from council to relook at that ordinance, potentially update it to include other types of e-mobility and to figure out what we can be doing to have conversations with other bike shop owners or stakeholders to make sure that we're getting that right. Especially as you noted earlier during the slow time where we're not seeing as many people out there, but we know that come springtime, everybody's going to be out there again. And so spending some time to make sure we can do what we can to address those concerns beyond the Lime scooters as well.
Council member, I think you raised a good point, at least from the mayor's office. I think the majority of the complaints in the last little while have been by about privately owned e-scooter, e-bike, fill in the blank, not necessarily those provided by Lime. On to climate. The Community Climate Action Committee is on track to have a deliverable by the end of this year. We also have benefited from a Harvard Fellow. I think this is the second Harvard Fellow the city has received funding for, and she will be working with us for the next 2 years to develop and implement the climate action results from the committee. On geothermal, the city has submitted a final grant application for $1 million for a Bloomberg's Mayor Challenge grant to expand geothermal lines. I did also just yesterday have a promising conversation with the Idaho National Laboratory on what partnerships might be available to do many things our geothermal system needs. So I think that was a good sign. And then you all did pass CPACE, which is the financing incentive. We haven't received any applications, but we continue to provide the education in hopes that developers take advantage of it. And then this body of work, because I think it's more in the soft skills, often doesn't come before you, but this is really our economic development work. And in a partnership with Bloomberg and Harvard, we determined with their data that 2 of the constraining factors in Boise on economic development are the availability of housing and the lack of transportation options and planning. And we continue to have direct conversations with the chamber about how they can be involved in an initiative they're launching called Keep Idaho Moving, which is really at the base of the lack of transportation funding and options through the region, but more specifically in Boise. And then the Greater Boise Auditorium District, myself and several of you have continued to have conversations with GBAD about how they might consider investing and the city's preference to have that investment in downtown Boise. An issue that will become before you by the end of the year is the future URD planning. So we continue to assess potential locations of future URDs in partnership with CCDC and Planning and Development Services. And we will bring these to you this year. I just can't remember the date off the top of my head. And we are doing a citywide land capacity and feasibility study with PDS in part to inform future URD planning. For example, in these discussions, we've talked about needing an anchor investment, and in some cases, the city might be able itself to provide the anchor for a new URD, and that's why we're doing that exploration. We continue to support Micron and its growth. We do quite a bit of conversations with regional and state partners and the Department of Commerce to ensure we're attracting and retaining the employees that this expansion and its associated supportive companies need. We have seen an increase in the request for information for new potential projects in Boise. This year, it's been 38 inquiries versus 33 in 2024, and 20% of these are related to the semiconductor industry. And we frequently meet with these folks to get a better understanding of what they need and what Boise might be able to provide. And then direct business engagement. The mayor and I and Sean Keithley have been meeting with some of the heads of the larger employers in Boise to get a better understand of any constraints they may be experiencing on the city side, given their businesses. And I would say the take home right now is transportation, both road and the airport. So our businesses, particularly the bigger ones in town, would really like to get to the East Coast faster. They have preferred locations, but at the end of the day, closer to the East Coast, north of Atlanta, would be the preferred approach. And then the access to housing, particularly if that housing is in our surrounding cities and the connector is providing the main source of transportation between where they live and where they work. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Corliss.
Courtney, on your engagement out to the businesses and looking at what may be impacting growth, and we heard about traffic in the airport getting to the East Coast, have they brought up anything around daycare?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe so. I believe the additional daycare facilities that you've enabled, in addition to Micron putting an on-site facility at that location, has alleviated some of the pressure on our current childcare facilities. And I believe everyone's looking forward to the expansion at the new Y as well.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember.
Courtney, it sounds like you're doing a lot of the things that we've talked about that we've already discussed. So I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into all these different strategic initiatives. And this is probably, again, something that you're already working on, but leaning into that regional rail and kind of that intersection between those businesses, the airport influence area, our industrial park, urban renewal district that's over there. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're, pre-building infrastructure or saving easements, looking for land that may be needed to get things to happen so that we're setting ourselves up for success for future regional rail. It's not something that I expect to see completed while I'm on city council, but I want to make sure that we're still taking the steps today to get all those different types of things done. And so again, whether that's protecting an easement, working with CCDC and an urban renewal district to make sure that that's part of the planning, out there in that area. And then as we're working with these other employers, I have no doubt that you all are doing those things, but just want to put an emphasis though, and vocalize my support and I think council's support for leaning into that effort. Because I do think that, 10 years from now, that's the solution that we're looking for to address some of the traffic concerns that we're facing today.
I appreciate that. Any other questions or points of feedback? The other issue, Councilmember Halliburton, that we are bringing back, as you well know, but so everyone else knows, is the youth roadmap. That is on the schedule to do this year as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Corliss.
Yeah, the last thing, Courtney, thank you very much for all these updates on the strategic initiatives. I think the city's making really great progress on all of these. The one thing I just want to make sure that we're also keeping in the forefront, and what came out of our last budget talks this year, was to take a look in regard to safety as the 4-person staffing at fire stations, and to make sure that we're including that as an outlook going forward.
Councilmember, we've had preliminary conversations with the incoming fire chief, and we will continue to do so. I am looking to bring to you at a work session the staffing needs of police, fire, and library. So to give you all a better understanding of how those things interact or need to be timed to meet the goals that you all have expressed, but that will be on the calendar as well.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Councilmember Halliburton, you've brought this up in the past, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to add if there is a work session being proposed for police, fire, and library about more broader system-wide evaluation of staffing. Do you have any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think in the library meeting, I just talked to about some of the specific needs for future FTEs that we may need to be looking at, across the board, because you're right. Like, there is a balance. I think police and fire, the ones that we often think about the most. But if we were to be thinking about bringing a new library, we would need to know how many it would take to do that. And certainly there's probably a need to evaluate what are the anticipated staffing needs and FTEs with the other departments as well. And I think that we know some of that, but I do think it's healthy for council to understand, a broader picture. So yes, I think for police, fire, and library. And then if we know that there's other planned growth, that's going to take, more maintenance in parks as we build more parks, these types of things, I think it's good for council members to have in mind so that we're weighing that when we make our budgetary decisions.
I think it'll also be very helpful based on our conversation in leadership last week, Courtney, if we felt like we had a better understanding of the library staffing needs, it will help inform conversations around facilities. I think we have a council that wants to be responsive to the public as it relates to our facilities, but we have to better understand not only what they want, what we can do in capital planning, but also what the library can accommodate, and what they can do, how we're staffing our current system, so that we can kind of see an order of operations about what it would take to get to what the public wants. And I think it sounds like staffing is maybe a less visible need that we've identified than maybe the other stuff that we've put some resources into, like the facilities planning. And I think what would be helpful for me as a council member in seeing the full picture is in the same way that I think we have some strategic either plans or information about what police and fire needs are that have been public and are well known on council. I think we might have less of an idea about other departments in the city that are just as important.
Council President, I agree with everything you said. I do believe I need to bring back and ensure that you have full transparency on the departments that are currently working in a staff deficit, and the library would be in that category. And I need to look and see who else. I mean, I can't remember how many years ago when the library asked for 22 librarians. We were unable to afford that expansion at the time, but I don't think that number has declined since then. So I will do a review of the general fund funded departments to see if anyone else feels they're at a deficit coming into the budget build, so that you have more transparency on where the needs are and who's been waiting.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't doubt that every single department feels like they've got staff that are doing more than they've ever done before, in a growingly complicated time and a part-time that's growing for the entire city. I think it's good for us to remember that it's not always just the city of Boise's population that's growing, but the entire Treasure Valley. And then our expectation from a park standpoint, from a police standpoint, from a fire standpoint, to be serving a much broader area. And so I know it is a challenge. Just one kind of, I think, specific ask, I think, for police and fire when we come back and know a little bit of those positions. Also knowing what type of those positions are, which I think is always especially helpful for police, as we grow to understand like what the needs are of the department. one of the ones at least that I've been hearing is additional help with alcohol compliance. We, talked about sexual assault earlier today, but for us to have a picture of like, we anticipate this many FTEs and sort of here's the specific area that in police and fire that we would want those FTEs sort of working in.
Councilmember, I think the good news is now that BPD has completed a strategic plan, you can actually see the 5-year build out of both public safety entities. For a while there, we had more information about fire than most departments in the city. And at least from the public safety point of view, we've equalized that information to make it easier. And I'm sure you're all aware, but public safety is over half of the city's overall budget. So I like to say like one estimation wrong on their part is like half of the Department of Arts and History. So we're trying to get really, really good at the public safety planning and the investment in those folks. But I'd be happy to do that. It's a lot easier than it was before.
Lucy, did you have a question?
I did. Courtney, thanks so much for the overview. And I know that there's a lot of different departments that you're speaking for. When we have more information on the transportation plans for the region, I'd be very interested in including what Compass is doing. If Bree could speak to that. There was a front page story a few months ago actually on some of the things that they've been looking at. I think that would help us as we talk about increased rail and all the other things that the city wants to make sure that that's part of the equation.
Councilmember, I appreciate that. Actually, Compass was supposed to be with us this morning, but because of scheduling conflicts, they were unable to. So you will also see them. You can hear how packed your schedules are going to be, but you will also see them by the end of the year.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you, Courtney. Next up, we have Andrea, who's going to present on the special events pilot 1-year check-in.
All right, Mr. Mayor, council members, nice to see you. All right, we're going to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to present on 2 topics today, and mostly updates, but this one will have some action needed at a future session. So for the record, Andrea Cantor, Policy Advisor in the Mayor's Office. I'm here to provide the 1-year update on the pilot ordinance related to special events, which was approved by Council last December. So before we begin, I want to make sure just to reiterate that when we use the term special event in this presentation, it's specific to an event that anticipates more than 1,000 attendees, which require extensive planning and extra resources. So kind of important there. To begin, I'll just refresh us all on the background on special events. So over the past several years, Boise has seen a growth in community events with large-scale events like Tree Fort and Boise Pride becoming integral parts of our community vibrancy. In 2024, for example, there were about 60 special events permitted, and around 30 of those took place in a public park. And the numbers were similar in 2023. Also, there's been conversations with special event organizers who have expressed an interest in updating the city's approach to alcohol regulations in public spaces for permitted special events. So in response to this community level request kind of last year, staff proposed and council approved some of the minor code amendments along with some of the code cleanup as part of this ordinance. The main changes was to update the Boise City Code to allow for the inclusion of liquor alongside currently permitted beer and wine during specific permitted events in select parks, such as Julia Davis and Ann Morrison, where we see a lot of our larger events. Staff feel these changes help address the changing preferences of our community, provide new opportunities for event growth and broaden revenue opportunities. And there was no changes proposed to the current special event procedures, which include a robust special event committee that review each application and have a lot of touch points before something's approved. So this slide just provides a quick overview of some of the external parties and internal departments that were engaged and consulted during the outreach and remain in support of this ordinance. Here's just a quick snapshot of the outreach done in 2024 and the approval of the pilot ordinance in December. As a reminder, the proposed amendments to alcohol only apply to the permitted parks and select park areas that already allow beer and or wine with a permit. So we weren't proposing anything new for alcohol. So as of January 1, 2025, the pilot kicked off, and as of today, we want to report back that there were 2 special events that utilize this pilot to include liquor sales as part of their event. The events were Tree Fort and Boise Pride. So in preparing for this 1-year update, staff consulted event organizers, our special events team, and the Boise Police Department. All parties reported no concerns with the process, approvals, compliance, or event safety related to the addition of liquor alongside beer and wine for these events. Given council's focus on safety, I'll just pause for a minute and turn the mic to Police Chief Dennison just to provide his assessment of this pilot program on behalf of BPD. I love that.
Mr. Mayor, Council, hi again. So when we looked at the events that occurred, again, there was only 2 that had the liquor in addition to the beer and wine, as Ms. Cantor stated. And we saw no issues related specifically with the liquor sales in the park with those 2 events. Any of the concerns that we had related to special events were outside of that scope. They're just general concerns that we're bringing forward in our overall strategy and how we want to staff those moving forward.
Chief Dennison, I think I mistook Officer Kolos as a bartender because he was in plain clothes behind the stage at Pride, keeping an eye on things. So we appreciate working with us on this. One piece of feedback for Andrea, I think I would be comfortable lifting the 1-year restriction on this and allowing this to become a policy ongoing. I was at both events, and the one thing I would like to keep an eye on, I don't think in our special event permits we required the servers to be tip certified. If police officers do identify any problems with who is serving in the future, that is one thing I might be interested in. I didn't identify any concerns with that the last 2 events, so that's not a change that I'm interested in making at this time, but that is something I would like to keep our eyes on. Councilmember Halbert did raise a question about whether or not there are any outstanding issues, and my understanding is that there is between event organizers and maybe outstanding questions about state law related to getting paid advertisements from liquor manufacturers. And I'm wondering what the status of that is, and if you could shed any light on it, or if it's still outstanding, just let us know that.
Mr. Mayor, so it was a concern. It came up, I believe, specifically with the Tree Fort when Tree Fort was having theirs. Our stance is we're going to follow state law, and we will not authorize any paid advertisements in accordance with state law. So if there needs to be a change at that, we're going to recommend that they lobby the state to make that change, but that's not something we're going to change in our permitting process.
Understood. And is it your understanding any alleged maybe misunderstandings about the application of the state law? Is that just between the event organizers and state police, or are there arguments about the interpretation of the code as it's written right now that you're aware of?
Mr. Mayor, that gets a little complicated when we get into it. There's a variety of, we hear one thing from one group and one from another. We've done our interpretation of state law with city legal. And we think that we're in the correct position with this. I think what we've seen is they've gone shopping to other groups, including ABC or somebody else, to try to get different answers. Then they come back and say what was told to them. And I don't know necessarily that to be true. So we're just going to follow the line the way we interpret state law with guidance from legal.
Understood. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think on kind of my outreach, we will make sure to close the loop with event organizers just to make sure we're very clear on that guidance, since I think there was some back and forth last year. So we will reiterate what the chiefs shared.
Andrea, one thing that we brought up in leadership last week when we talked about this presentation was getting something in writing from police, like in the form of a memo, or maybe events committee with police support on there. But we would like something in writing demonstrating like what has happened over the last year and why there may not be any concerns about lifting the sunset provision of this ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, we'll be sure to get that to you in council in a memo form.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Corliss.
Andrea, thank you for the presentation and for the update. I know the aim of the program in the pilot was to be a tool to support event growth. Do we have those numbers so that we can see if it actually did have an impact for the growth for these organizers?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Corliss, what we heard from event organizers was the addition of liquor, in addition to beer and wine, didn't necessarily show in large numbers. But what we did learn from Tree4 as they work on their economic impact report was they were able to finish in the black, as they say. Their event did better than it did in previous years. I don't think that they would point that specifically to this, but I think they would share that this was one of the tools, one of the pieces of the puzzle that helped them just run their business in a way that they felt was necessary. So I don't think we have the numbers yet to show that this specific thing is helping them, but I think it's fair to say it's just another way that we've kind of stepped out of the way and allowed these businesses to make the choices that they need to operate the best way they can.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, Andrea, thank you for that. I mean, I think with that being the whole goal of the program to adding the hard liquor there, I'd really like to see those numbers to see what impact it had before we see about making this a permanent decision, if that's possible.
Andrea, with that, could you give us a timeline on when we could expect ordinance to come before us to give us an idea of what work council members might need to do to with staff to get to a place where they could better understand the efficacy of removing the sunset provision?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As the schedule sits right now, it'd likely be the second council meeting in January that we bring this back to council. So I'd say from now until kind of the new year, we could work to get some additional information in addition to the memo from special events team and BPD, just to help council feel more comfortable with what choices they would like to make. Just as a reminder, the current ordinance does have a sunset provision built in, making this the 1-year pilot, and it will expire automatically January 31st, 2026. So the hope is to get in front of you before that, so you're able to take action as you see fit.
I'd also encourage council members to reach out to the event sponsors directly. There's only 2 organizations that took advantage of it, and I was under the one thing that did surprise me, and I would be curious if Andrea, you had any feedback on this. I was under the impression Pride was going to do public alcohol sales and not just in their VIP area, which they've historically done, just at a different location this year. So I would encourage council members to reach out directly to event sponsors to get a better understanding as well. Not put all that burden on staff. But I think it's a pretty easy lift given that there's only 2 organizations that utilized it last year.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think that's a great point. I think event organizers in this round did use it in kind of a limited capacity. Boise Pride, for example, just had kind of a small footprint for their VIP tent where they chose to serve liquor alongside beer and wine. So it wasn't part of their full event. There's different reasons for that. Some of it is how they set up the footprinting, who, security needs that also play into some of the costs of putting on an event. So there's probably a few different answers that you'll get of kind of how they used it, why, and what might be important for them in the future. So a few things to think about.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and just to clarify there, I think if we can just look at the tree fort sales and see how the alcohol, hard alcohol impacted that over the past few years since they've been around would be helpful.
Great.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a couple comments here. Andrea, one, I appreciate you being here today. When we had this discussion last year, we had asked you to come back about this time of year, October, November, to make sure that we were giving, I think, the event partners who are using this a good timeline to make sure that they can do some of their planning for the new year. And I guess just one of the things that I want to note is that we have just gotten a report back that said that we didn't have any known issues, from the year before, not from the police department, not from the events, and not from our staffs. And so I do think that it's good for council to continue to look into it, but I would also just want to make sure that we're still doing our best to give a clear timeline and an indication where we can as far as organizers go who are working on some of this stuff. So I'm certainly supportive of continuing what we have been doing, and feel comfortable saying that. I would like to know, and maybe it comes in the form of that memo, if we can get some clear distinction from legal and police as far as the marketing and the advertisements go, because I don't know if there's a distinction between sponsorship versus advertisements versus marketing and some other things. I would love to be able to have that, from our, legal interpretation to make sure that we are getting that correct. But again, I would just state that, we did this last year as a pilot. We didn't have any concerns. And I think it's good for council to, as we get closer to this date, to make sure that we're indicating, to event organizers who are going to be planning something just a few months down the road, where we might be in support of.
Councilmember Willits or Councilmember Morales, I know you guys were no votes on this last year. So this would be an opportunity to give any feedback on the ordinance. If you want to see any changes, or you need to see more information before you'd be willing to take it up again, this would be the opportunity to weigh in.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for the opportunity. I would just say I appreciate all the work that's gone into making the two events that have happened already successful. Especially those Officer Colos efforts. I don't know if that's part of park policy or part of the policy that would continue after this. Obviously, Matt, there's a scope on these two projects being during a pilot cycle, more attention, but just ensuring that they continue to operate well. I appreciate that. I think my underlying feelings about events in our parks probably don't change, but I appreciate all the efforts that are going into trying to make this as successful as possible.
Andrea, thanks so much for coming and giving us a heads up on this, that it's almost been a year. Appreciate that very much. One of the things that I would be curious is if the pilot phase is removed, what does it look like in terms of other special events that might want to also have alcohol? Like, how many are we looking at? Because we knew when this came forth that Tree Fort was a big piece of this. And I obviously don't have to give that answer right now, but I would be very curious about how much this would expand.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Willits, that's a great question and not something I have kind of line of sight to. I haven't had event organizers reach out that are currently in our orbit that have expressed this interest. I think when we talked to the special events team and Boise Police Department, we didn't anticipate that this would be there'd be a large group of folks that would utilize this. I can't speak for the future, but as we stand today, there's kind of a limited use because as we kind of talked about, the special events process is intensive. There are a lot of pieces to it, especially when you add alcohol into your event. There are other factors that go into your costs as well, like kind of the public safety piece, how many officers you need, what kind of fencing, what kind of, wristbanding. So more to come, and we can kind of put some feelers out there, see if there's been others who have inquired, but it's not as simple as saying we would like to add alcohol to our event because then it creates another set of matrix choices that people have to make that come with costs. So
thank you so much. Mr. Mayor, one more follow-up. And Andrea, I know you probably don't have this off the top of your head, but it would be very helpful for us to understand. I know that there are certain festivals that the city supports, often with in-kind funding. If the city support will need to increase because of this, because of the increased police presence, all of those sorts of things, if there is a direct impact. That would be something else I'd be curious to know.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for that. Yeah, that's something we can kind of look further into. What does it look like as these expand and some of the other costs, and then how does the city support them? That's a great question for follow-up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. Oh, got you back. Film update.
All set. Okay, I will exit this one. We'll pause and I will come back on film. So give me 1 second. Okay, here we are. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, here I are. For the record, Andrea Cantor, Policy Advisor. So for this one, I'm just here to provide an update on filmography, as the last update to the council was December 2023. So just wanted to share kind of where we were and where we've been since then. There's no action. This is just kind of share what's been done. To begin, I'll just do a quick look back at where we kind of started in 2022 and end where we are today in 2025 for this. So just as a quick refresher, this work originated with the film community wanting more resources to be dedicated to the growing the film industry, both at the city and state level. Currently, the city nor the state offer film-specific incentives or staff exclusively for film, while there are other cities and states that have chosen to offer resources like tax incentives or film office to attract film projects. So a main goal with creating a film permit was to help encourage commercial activity and economic development by creating a simple permit to help us better understand the size, scope, and needs of industry, and also so we kind of better knew what was going on in our city. The permit was a first step in building the infrastructure for this part of the creative economy and to kind of help advocate for future resources. The film permit and the ordinance provided guidance on when a permit is needed, the type based on tier, so low to high impact, for commercial filming on public property unless otherwise exempt. So some of the exemptions include student and contest films, which we heard were an important component of this policy and that they should not be regulated. So here's just a quick overview of the outreach completed in 2022 to 2023, which included outreach to 50 or so film industry stakeholders. During this time, we received valuable input that informed the film ordinance and the creation of the film permit, which was approved by council in December 2023 with an effective date of November 2024. So in 2024, with approval from council, staff worked diligently to create a permit, build out a full automated system in Excel, and get this implemented into our systems and our workflow. So as of November 2024, the permit was made available. It kind of went live online for users to begin to apply for. So stakeholders have been encouraged to spread the word about the new resources and actively use the permit process. So this kind of brings us to this year. So 2025 has been dedicated to learning how users will navigate the platform, how they interact with the permit, and we've been receiving input on how this can be improved. So staff conducted a 6-month review in March, as requested by stakeholders, connected with stakeholders in July, and received suggestions for some permit improvements. And we're currently working with community engagement on an outreach flyer to provide kind of the community on when to apply for a permit and kind of how. So since launching the permit, there have been 24 permits applied for and reviewed by staff with a hope for more in 2026. And so kind of for next steps, staff remain committed to supporting film stakeholders through the film permit and data collection. Additionally, we hope folks like the Idaho Film Society and other key stakeholders will continue to build support and work to create incentives and resources that are meaningful for their industry. We've recently heard that the Idaho Film Society is working on kind of portfolio of work, and we'll use the city's film permit as an example when they go speak to Idaho Commerce, and just kind of share what they've been working on and how the state might be able to support them too. And so with that, just thank you to everyone who's engaged in this effort, and I can stand for any questions.
Any questions, Council? Councilmember Halberton.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just thank you, thank you. You know, I saw this one from the beginning to the end. I remember the big group of people who are advocating for this in the room. And I think that's just a really good example of how stakeholder outreach can make a process so much stronger and make sure that we're doing it in a way where everybody's excited about it, helps out the city, helps out them, addresses a lot of concerns. And then I just want to say thank you for the last slide there, and would definitely encourage us to continue to support those state level incentives. We know that Idaho would be a great place to do a lot of filming, and we're a very diverse state with a lot of diverse landscapes. And, you know, there are some opportunities that other states take advantage of to recruit more film. And so I think if that's something that we can continue to support, I would say, yes, absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Okay. We do not have an executive session, so we're going to break for lunch and be back at noon.